All right. So again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. So to get us started, tell me about yourself, about who you are, what you do, and what you're passionate about in games.
My name's Lesley Mathieson. I am currently a senior producer at Heart Machine, as well as an adjunct professor in the AGP class in the USC Games program. Let's see, I have a long history in video games. I've been in the video games industry at this point over 20 years. Actually, maybe coming up on 25. And I've done a wide variety of things. I am most known for my work on the PlayStation series Ratchet and Clank. I was one of the original 3 Ratchet and Clank designers on the PlayStation 2, and worked on several of those games at Insomniac, as well as Resistance Fall of Man, and then co-founded my own studio to produce the PSP Ratchet and Clank games as well. Since then, I've run a couple different studios. I've made a companion robot for children, and now I'm back working on a game again.
That's super, super cool. So either personally or professionally, what does Women's History Month mean to you?
Well, I think it's important to go back and highlight things, because I see, I mean, I'm personally a fan of history, so I spend a lot of time reading anecdotes. And it is far, far too common to read stories where you find out that women were critically involved in things or created things, invented things, and those things were swept under the carpet at the time. One of the things that always comes to mind recently was a documentary I watched on the woman who discovered pulsars, and how her contribution was basically just, ignored for the purposes of things like the Nobel Prize and so forth went to her professor at the time without a mention of her contribution. So I think it's really important to have a time to highlight these things, because then these stories start to come out. It really starts people start actually looking and paying attention. And that's when you hear about what women have done, and it's an important thing to acknowledge, because it so frequently has not been in the past.
Right. And I feel that applies especially to the games industry. So how does your identity as a woman intersect with your identity as a game developer? Or how do you think those two identities have influenced each other?
Well, it's interesting. So I started in the game industry at a time where there were very few women in it. Now it's very different comparatively, and there's still not enough women in the game industry, but just compared to then, it's already increased a lot. When I was with Insomniac, I used to do interviews with the press just because I was a woman working on a video game, and that was enough to gain me attention and interviews and that sort of thing. So I'm glad to see that changing over time. For me, it is, I think I've had a lot of luck with the people that I've worked with. I've worked with, generally very open people who are mainly focused on my work. Not always, I think, but that's mainly what I've dealt with in the game industry. However, I think that it has been important to widen this, because that's not always the case with women in the past, certainly in the game industry. So I don't think, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think those two can be separated in any way, because of the attention given to it, given the timing. People used to even ask me oh, you like video games? Because at the time that I was growing up, it was just not common for women to like games, or even the types of games. I liked role-playing games. I liked all sorts of, games beyond just video games, and that was considered unusual. So it's nice to see that evolving. It's both my daughters are huge gamers, and no one even bats an eye at that, because now that is the norm. And it's really nice to see that change.
It's great to see. So I see you're giving a talk with a few others at GDC coming up soon, which is really exciting. I'm looking forward to it. So it's Women Building Careers in the Game Industry. Would you like to give a brief overview about some topics that you're going to talk about?
Yeah, well, I think it's mainly a bunch of very talented women, and me on a panel, and the idea is to cover, you know, things that have been successful for us, things that we think would help people, what resources might help people who are trying to get into games, especially, you know, what women may encounter in games, and what our advice to them would be in a variety of circumstances. I think there's a lot of good information for people who are looking to move into a career in games.
Really looking forward to that. And last but not least, this is a bit more of a fun question. Who is a female hero from either a game or real life who inspires you?
You know, that's tricky because I've never, like, the person, I never know, like, if someone asks me my favorite game, I never have a good answer for these things. But I will say, okay, I'll go back to one of my favorite games, you know, main character is a woman, and I always enjoyed the game so much, and the character, and that was Beyond Good and Evil, the character Jade. I always loved her. So